Welcome to another episode of Minor Details, our Chicago Cubs minor league focused podcast. As we move into the offseason, we've started to talk to some of the players from this year. And today, happy to be joined by the recently announced Chicago Cubs minor league player of the year, Jonathon Long. Johnny, how are you doing so far this offseason?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just out here in Arizona, enjoying the vibes out here.
I'm going to ask you about being named minor league player of the year in a few moments. But first and foremost, it's a long season. I would imagine this season, in terms of being in one place and playing a season, the longest of your career. So, what does it look like as the season comes to an end late in September and now into late October? What do you do to kind of first maybe get away and get refreshed and then start back up with baseball?
So I took about 2 weeks off. Didn't really do much. Played a lot of golf. Still played some golf. And then came out to Arizona because I knew, they're gonna have a good strength program for me to, follow up until whenever the dead period is. And it's been the off season's been nice. You have a lot more downtime than you do during the season, and it's nice to be able to be a normal human being for a couple of months.
Is the offseason a little bit more enjoyable when you're coming off of a really, really good year than maybe if you had a year where you were frustrated toward the end or something? Like, is it nice to hit over 300, to hit 20 home runs? We'll talk about your numbers a little bit, but when you have a really good season, does that make it even a little bit more enjoyable to kind of sit back and look at that and go, all right, I had a really good year?
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to look back on and reflect and be able to just be proud of, obviously it's the most games I've ever played in a season, and the results were good, and just being, uh, posting every day. That's kind of what I'm most proud of, is just being available and hopefully to carry everything into next year.
People think about it all the time with football. I don't know that baseball gets the same amount of attention to this, but by the end of a 6 or 7 month season, everybody's a little bit banged up, right? Things are sore. There's nagging injuries that have been happening. So, is that a big part of, man, you get through that? Like you said, you're able to be available every day that the team needed you to be out there. And obviously, there are off days mixed in the minor league schedule, and guys are going to get some time off. But how refreshing is it when you battle and your body gets beaten up a little bit over that amount of time to just let everything heal and come back feeling 100% or close to it?
Well, it's just, throughout the season, you're never going to feel 100%. Even, you play opening day, that's probably the best you'll ever feel. But you get in the training room, I had like a plantar fasciitis thing the whole year. So it was just, maintaining that, getting it taped every day. The hamstrings too, getting those worked on whenever, they tighten up or whatever. Um, just being able to maintain throughout the season, especially, with the lifts and everything, to just stay healthy. And you get, and it pays off in the end when you're available, I'd say. So yeah.
I think from a broadcast perspective and a front office perspective, there are some differences between each level of minor league baseball, from low A to high A, from high A to double A, and then to triple A. What was the biggest adjustment maybe for you going from double A to triple A this year?
Probably the scouting reports. Every team has, your weaknesses and stuff. But what I learned more is, like, when you're chasing a certain pitch at a certain time, that's all they're going to go back to until you prove that you're not going to swing at it. Or, especially with two strikes, there are certain pitches that were hot zones to swing at. And you kind of just learn, like, it's an 0-2 count. He's probably not going to throw me a strike here. And you kind of, the strikeout numbers in the, first half were a little higher than the back half, and it's just a game of adjustments and learning, what to swing at, what not to swing at. When you have count leverage, when to take a shot, stuff like that.
I would imagine there's also a lot fewer non-competitive pitches at this level than there are early in your professional career, even in college, where you might see some at bats where there's not a pitch that's close to the zone. It feels like, for the most part, at this level, it's a lot of guys with big league experience that are at least throwing the ball close to where they want to.
Yeah, you're gonna. Um, you get a lot of those, guys that get sent up and down, and you're facing, big leaguers, and um, they're going to be stingy. They're not going to make 0-2 mistakes. They're not going to just groove you an 0 fastball. You kind of have to. It's a game of chess. You got to think along with them, and when you get your pitch, you can't miss it because then it hitting as hard as it is, especially when you're down in the count.
So 2025 Cubs Minor League Player of the Year. That's a pretty impressive honor. It's not necessarily what you're setting out to do at the beginning of a season, but how does that sound? Jonathon Long, Cubs Minor League Player of the Year.
I mean, it's awesome. I didn't really ever like think about it, but it's nice when you play a full season and you get rewarded for that type of stuff. It's kind of makes me proud to look back on the year.
We talked about it quite a bit throughout the year. I think everybody did, about how much talent was on the Iowa Cubs roster this year as well. So even to be, if you wanted to break it down to like the Iowa Cubs Player of the Year, that's pretty impressive. But then you take beyond that, everybody else in the organization. When Casey was on your team, Moises Ballesteros won it last year. Guys like Carlos Perez had great years. So I would imagine that's, again, not the ultimate goal, right? But like you said, when you start to look back on things, that's something you can tell people down the line about back from your playing career.
100%. It's everyone's on their journey, and it's another, I guess, milestone along the journey towards an even bigger goal. So just getting back to it, have a good spring training, and start the year strong next year.
And then I know you love talking about yourself so much, but one more award. You were a AAA All-Star at first base. And I would think, almost in a different way than winning the Cubs Minor League Player of the Year, here's a bunch of people that watch games at the AAA level saying that you're the best first baseman. So that has to be sort of a cool honor in a slightly different way.
Yeah, it's everything that happened and all the rewards and stuff. It's really nice, and you kind of can't get too caught up in what happened last year, I guess, in a sense, because there's a whole nother season to be played. There's expectations and everything that need to be fulfilled at the end of the day. So um, look back and be proud on it, and then build on it.
You hit 20 home runs this year. That was a career high for you professionally, but also going back to college and kind of looking at your college numbers at Long Beach State. It looked like you weren't a huge home run hitter until your final season there. You hit 15. Is that something that you feel like your power has kind of matured with you as you've made your way up the ranks of professional baseball?
I'd say it's just utilizing uh, kind of like a line drive swing, but at the end of the day, like I don't think just hitting the ball hard in the air is kind of what I'm trying to do, and that's probably what's going to obviously that's what's going to play in my game the most. Um, so just hit the ball hard, get it up in the air, and you look back at 20 home runs, and it's great. But there's also opportunities to improve and be even better than that.
You ended the year with 91 RBI as well, which was the most for an Iowa Cubs player since 2011, which is quite a long time ago. And to get close to 100, which I think is always a big number in baseball. And I think RBI is a big number because it means you're giving your team a chance to win the game. And it also shows how good the lineup was in front of you and behind you. That, first of all, there were always guys on base when you came to the plate. And then there were guys behind you that they didn't want to pitch to either. So to drive in that many runs, again, it has to be a nice feeling to come to the plate knowing men are on base most of the time.
Yeah, it's nice. Our lineup did a good job setting the table the whole season. And, especially in those run scoring situations, I always made an emphasis on, like, if it's second and third or a guy on third, less than 2 outs, like just move the ball forward. There's a high chance, even a ground ball scores a run, or, with the infield drawn in, a hard ground ball, could get through and you get, even more, you get 2 RBIs or whatnot. Just being able to move the ball forward in, certain situations, and kind of capitalizing on get it done early in the count is what I learned in college. You're not going to always have the best pitch, but just get the job done, and then you see results at the end of the year. Something to look back on.
I'm going to ask you about one more accomplishment, if you will, and then I'll get away from that, I promise. But you also set the franchise record here for an on-base streak. one of the longest in AAA this year at 35 games. And you talked a little bit about when guys are on base doing some damage early in the count, but I thought it was really tough for pitchers for a big part of the year to get you to chase out of the zone whatsoever. So to get on base in that many consecutive games over, I think, almost 2 full months, like, do you first of all realize that you have an on base streak? And then secondly, how did you become as patient of a hitter as you are right now?
I didn't really like pay attention to it at all. I feel like when you have a hit streak going, you kind of pay more attention to that, but not an on base streak, I guess. But it was just, I guess, growing from the first couple months and taking the walks. Don't necessarily need to swing 3-1 all the time if you're not going to get a good pitch to hit. And just being smart like that. Take your walks. It's kind of on base percentage at the end of the day. So
What was it like watching Carlos Perez play for a full season? I've heard a number of really good answers about this. For a guy that's been doing it as long as he has, it certainly doesn't look like he's slowed down at all.
I loved it. I love being his teammate. He's kind of like that guy that like I would look to like, obviously he played in the big leagues and, just kind of seeing how, what his experience was like, guys he faced, how to manage a whole season up there, expectations, stuff like that. And then to see what he did, sometime every time he came to the plate, you're like, well, he's going to try to hit a home run to left field. So it was awesome to spend a year with him.
You spend as much time as you do with these guys. Were there certain people on the 2025 Iowa Cubs that, when everybody's in the dugout, when that guy comes to the plate or this guy's on the mound, that everybody kind of gets excited to watch pitch or hit? Did you have anybody like that you kind of looked forward to watching?
When Wiggins came up, I'd never played with Wiggins before, so it was nice to see him pitch and stuff like that. Hitting wise, I mean, just being behind like Owen, Bally, when Matt was there, when Shaw was there, it was just cool to be a part of everything.
Yeah, I would imagine when you get a guy like Jackson Wiggins or Cade Horton on your team, you're happy that you don't have to face them in the batter's box too often.
I totally forgot about Cade too. That's on me. But Cade was awesome to start the year. That
It
feels
was
like so
early. That
long
was a long
ago.
time ago. That was
That
a long
feels
time
so
ago.
long ago.
One more question before we take a break here. They talk about in basketball that the hoop starts looking like an ocean. When things are going well, is there a different feeling stepping into the batter's box than maybe? I know there were maybe a couple of weeks where you just weren't seeing it quite as well as you did very early in the year and then late. How much of a difference is there when you step into the box when things are going well and maybe when you're trying to find it a little bit?
I mean, when things are going well, you kind of have this confidence, and you feel like you can beat anybody. Don't It doesn't matter who's on the mound. And then when things aren't going well, it's just fighting for that, not necessarily success, but just like a good result, whether that be a line out, a walk, something hit hard, and then you try to, at least I just try to build off that. Maintaining level head throughout the season. That's probably the biggest thing. You're gonna have your peaks, you're gonna have your valleys, but being able to stay in a good mindset, for 140, 150, 160 games throughout the season. If you don't do that, you're going to go crazy because you're going to live and die by the success and the failure.
We're talking to Chicago Cubs minor league player of the year, Jonathon Long, here on Marquee Sports Network. We'll take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit more about his journey to where he is currently in his career. All right, welcome back to Minor Details. We're joined by Chicago Cubs 2025 minor league player of the year and a AAA All-Star as a first baseman, Jonathon Long, in our second player podcast of the offseason. And right now we're in the middle of the Arizona Fall League. And I know that was a big trip for you after last season to go play in the Fall League, and where you kind of burst onto the scene for some people. So what is that experience like? You've played a long season. You get chosen to go there with some of the best prospects in baseball, and then your season continues for another month or so. What is that whole experience like from start to finish?
I enjoyed my time in the AFL. It was, obviously I played well, but the biggest part was, you meet a bunch of guys from different organizations, and you carry that over into, this season. I played against a lot of those guys that, I shared a clubhouse with, and it's just, you network in this game, and it's, you build those relationships, and that's kind of what I look back on. Even into college, there's guys that will forever be the best of friends. And so I mean, I enjoyed my time. Sometimes in late in November when you're still playing, it gets a little old, but overall it was a great time.
The first time I saw you play, we've talked about this before. You were in Myrtle Beach. I was in Charleston. We played each other. It felt like every other week. I saw you mostly at third base. And obviously this year and for the last couple of years, you've spent a bulk of your time at first base. Do you have, was there a learning curve to playing primarily first base or things different at that position at the professional level than in college? Or what has that transition defensively been like?
I mean, I played first in college, so I mean it came pretty natural. And there's not really much to it other than knowing where to be on relays and picking the ball or you know pickoffs and stuff like that. It's not. I mean, it's obviously hard, but the learning curve for me wasn't that bad because spent a lot of time in college at actually learning how to play the position, I'd say.
And is it hard to then go play third base 10 to 15 times a year when you are over at first, or is it pretty easy to react to the baseball and still kind of get your positioning down and making the throws from different angles?
It's definitely a little bit more difficult, I'd say, than first base, but I mean, it's the same concept. As long as you move your feet and secure the ball, the only extra part is slinging it over to first base. But I'd say probably the outfield was the biggest. Having to learn the outfield, still learn the outfield, because I know it's going to be important for defensive versatility and stuff like that. So just being able to widen all of the positions I can play.
I would imagine with the outfield, how much time, again, you played primarily first base, but you were out in left field a handful of times as well. Just going to these ballparks for the first time and learning, is the wall 17 feet high? Is it 6 feet high? Do I go back on a ball over my head? Do I have to play the carom? How much goes into that prior to game one of a series?
A lot of it does, mostly positioning. Since I'm not great out there, I'd say I'd probably play a little bit deeper than some guys do because I think it's easier to come in on the ball than go back. Um, so, but just taking fly balls, learning the different reads, knowing what the wind is doing because it's going to do a different thing every day in Des Moines at least. So I'm just learning everything that left field has. Even in I haven't played right field yet, but I'm guessing it's the same concept. So
When did you realize that baseball was something that you could do maybe a little bit better than everybody else you were playing with, and that maybe you could get to the point you're at now?
probably in college, in high school, like I wasn't really like recruited to go anywhere. I took a walk on spot at Long Beach State, and then my freshman year, I kind of just burst on the scene. I'd say started hitting. I had to hit my way into the lineup, I'd say, and I kind of didn't have room for error, I'd say. So my freshman year did get cut short with an injury, but just coming back my sophomore year and putting up a good year, I'd say, and then going to the Cape, having a really good junior year, kind of gave me the confidence of like, okay, I could probably do this at the next level. And then once I got into the Cubs system, everything, every resource, everything you could ever need to elevate your game, that's kind of, you know, just what evolved, I'd say.
Does that make it a little bit more? I'm trying to think of the word. I mean, would you trade anything about that journey from being sort of an overlooked high school player and then a walk on? Because, like you said, you kind of have to earn every opportunity you're going to get when you don't have a scholarship at school. Is that kind of a nice boost to mentally and physically locking in and making sure that you were doing the things you needed to get to this point?
Yeah, I think obviously everything worked out in the end, but it kind of shaped my mindset of like you can never get like too comfortable because this opportunity only lasts so long. So it's like you need to produce, you need to put up production, and need to be stable defensively to keep moving up through the system and stuff like that. So I'd say it really like just my mindset and stuff. It really shapes like how I look at, I guess, the business of baseball and how I shaped my journey because you can never be too complacent at all in this business.
You mentioned the draft, and the baseball draft is so different from the NFL draft, which is covered for months at a time, and there's mock drafts and all this, and a lot of guys have no clue where they're going to go, what team, what round. What was your draft experience like? Did you have any clue that the Cubs were interested? Did you know they were one of the teams looking at you, or what were your thoughts going into the draft?
I met with them at the draft combine. I think it was them and the Pirates and some other team. So I knew they were interested, but I didn't really know they were going to draft me. That whole draft process was interesting. My agent was like, "Yeah, you're probably going to go day 2 between like round 6 and 10." So I was like, "Okay." I just kept my phone on the whole day. He was like, "Will you take slot in the ninth?" And I was like, "Yeah, like let's do it. Let's just go play pro ball."
All right, final question for you here on the Marquee Sports Network portion of our podcast. You know, you get to this point, AAA, and you're having a good year. You know, do you let yourself dream about Wrigley Field and Major League Baseball? And if so, how often do those thoughts come into your mind?
A lot. You know, with every day that happens, and there's putting up a good season, and there's a shot to crack the roster. It's something, yes, I always thought about, but I always knew that I needed to take care of each day that was in front of me, more so than thinking of what could happen, because I didn't really have any control of what could happen up there, in a sense. But I did have control over what I could do down in Des Moines or wherever we were playing.
Awesome. Well, we're going to continue for a few more minutes on the Iowa Cubs YouTube channel, but that'll do it for this episode of Minor Details on Marquee Sports Network. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the other broadcasters, Luke, Brendan, and Richie. But Jonathan, again, congrats on being named Cubs Minor League Player of the Year, and thanks so much for taking some time this offseason.
Thank you.
Just a few more questions for you here as we continue on the Iowa Cubs YouTube channel. Are you a guy that during the season has time or makes time to watch baseball games or highlights, or specifically the Chicago Cubs? Or how do you, when you're playing a game every night, what is your appetite for watching baseball outside of the Iowa Cubs game?
I mean, I actually don't hate watching baseball. I know some guys are, we spend so much time at the field, they want to get away from it. But at least being in Des Moines a couple hours ahead of, I'm from the West Coast, so I'll watch, whoever's on. So I don't mind putting on a game after I get home to like unwind and ultimately fall asleep too. Like I don't hate it.
What are your thoughts on the playoffs, and then more specifically, by the time this airs, the World Series will be over. But I think it's been a really enjoyable postseason, and especially the World Series.
Yeah, I think the Blue Jays have surprised a lot of people. I think everyone's number one pick was, oh, the Dodgers are going to steamroll them. After you saw what they did in Milwaukee, but it's been a really interesting series. I'm hoping it goes 7, because why not? Make it interesting.
Yeah, I think everybody wouldn't mind a game 7 again in the World Series with everything on the line. How often have you played in cold weather? I know you've played in South Bend. Obviously, you've played in the Cape during the summer. You've played here in Des Moines now. But what is your experience playing in cold weather?
I don't think it's very fun, but it's something you have to do. I didn't really play in the cold weather in college because it doesn't really get that cold in Southern California. But yeah, South Bend was like the first taste of like it being freezing. And then, I didn't think Des Moines was that bad because we were gone the first 2 weeks. But like Toledo, that was probably the coldest I think I've ever been.
Think back to that whole first road trip, Indianapolis and then Toledo. Indianapolis, it was like 50 degrees and it rained every day. It was a struggle to play baseball. And then Toledo, like you said, guys were wearing 4 or 5 different shirts and sweatshirts underneath. But yet, if you look at your numbers in March and April, you hit 350 in those first couple of months. Is hitting different when you're having to wear layers, or do you not wear layers? Like, how do you approach that to be comfortable in the batter's box?
Well, I'll wear like a thermal and then like a long sleeve on top of that. But I think in the early months, it's like just keeping your hands warm. That's like the biggest part. Like, 'cause if you don't keep them warm and then you don't hit a ball in the barrel, like your hands are gonna ring for a couple innings, and that is never fun. So I guess just keeping them warm, kind of honing in on your pitch too. You can't just swing at everything, but also the longer your at bat goes on, the colder your hands get too. So that's kind of like a little struggle too. But yeah.
Yeah, if things go your way, though, you're going to be playing a lot more cold weather baseball games. So I guess it's good to get that experience in here. I wanted to ask you. This is a show with the other broadcasters for the most part from the Cubs minor league affiliates. So I know you've played at least somewhat at each of the different affiliates in the Cubs farm system so far. And before we dive into that and talk about Myrtle Beach, I know you weren't there for a ton of time, but with Buddy Bailey passing away recently, I think everybody you talk to that has been in the Cubs organization for any amount of time has been touched, and their career has been sort of shaped by Buddy. So, can you give us any memories of what he meant early on in your pro career?
Buddy helped me create a routine. Obviously, when you go to college and they have stuff for you to do, like but when you get to pro ball, it's not like that. Everyone's different. So, Buddy taught me to build a routine. In the cages, what kind of drills to do. What the infield defense, stuff like that. We were bunting. I remember that. I remember the Tuesdays was like a full day. We'd bunt, defense, hit on the field. So yeah, Buddy was probably. I mean, he had a very impactful short visit. I mean, I was only there for like a month and a half. So, but he left a big impact on me.
I would bet that every one of those days in that month and a half, though, you were out there for early work in some capacity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We always knew as a visiting team when you showed up at Myrtle Beach that you guys were going to be out on the field at 2 or 3 o'clock, guaranteed.
Yeah. Buddy puts you to work.
What else about Myrtle Beach? I know they're renovating their ballpark this offseason, so they're going to have new cages, a new clubhouse. But when you think about Myrtle Beach and the start, really, of playing in front of fans professionally, what are some of your memories from Myrtle?
So I didn't really get to go out like and explore Myrtle. So I was really only going to the field and stuff. I remember like the first game I played, there were probably like 5,000-6,000 people there, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of people here to watch a OA baseball game. So that was kind of cool. The the fan entertainment was different too. Like that was something I'd never seen before. So, but yeah, Myrtle was a great like start to my career. I'm just ultimately learning how to be a professional baseball player.
It's probably the first time you had a dog serve as the bat boy for
That
you
was
as
cool.
well.
Yeah, that was cool.
Every once in a while, he steals one that he's not supposed to take quite
Yep.
yet on a foul ball. That's what I enjoy. And then obviously High A in South Bend, you're close to Chicago. You can kind of feel. I always thought as a visiting broadcaster when we go to South Bend, like you knew you were playing a Cubs team. So there's some places you go where people are just baseball fans, but in South Bend, the game was always on when the Cubs were playing in the afternoon. It was on the video board. Everything about it was Chicago Cubs. What were your experiences in Indiana?
So yeah, it was the first time I ever played in cold weather. It was just kind of I don't it was different than Myrtle's. You're in East, I guess you're same time zone. Um, building off of what I did in Myrtle and actually having to uh learn learn the whole season process, because I knew when I was breaking the South Bend, I was like, okay, it's gonna be a 7 month grind, and we're gonna have to figure out how to balance everything and learn how to play a full professional season. So just kind of getting with all the trainers and hitting staff and all that stuff to figure out the best course of action to play a full season, I'd say. But yeah, South Bend, Notre Dame was cool, but like I mean, there wasn't really much else that I got around to doing, I guess, down there or up
I
there.
guess you brought up a good point with the time zone. Is it hard being in the Eastern time zone when your family and friends are 3 hours behind you?
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's not like the worst thing ever. Because I mean, I can still, after games and stuff, I can call them, and it's not 1 in the morning. Like it's 1 in the morning for me. They're eating dinner when we finish our games, essentially.
They're taking some time off work to watch Jonathan Long play baseball.
Well, yeah, my parents are both teachers, so like they'll get off work and the game's on at 4 o'clock. So
It's not a bad life.
no, and then they'll bridge that into whatever professional game they were gonna watch too. So
There you go. Uh, Tennessee, you were there the year before. Obviously, they built the brand new ballpark, and so I'm sure you heard from some of the guys who came up about what Knoxville now looked like in downtown. But what do you remember from last season being in Double A?
So yeah, Knoxville is probably my favorite stop or favorite affiliate that I've been to so far. They had the UT was right there. Kind of got a taste of what the college experience was like, even being out of college, I guess in a sense. So yeah, that was cool. I got to explore that campus. Never been there. Never been to Knoxville. So it's very green, uh, like hilly, mountainy. I don't know what to call it, um, but yeah, I like Knoxville a lot.
And then how about your first year in Des Moines? Again, you're in the Midwest, cold weather. The season starts a little bit earlier, but again, I think here you get a sense, even more than some of the other AAA fan bases, that you're definitely a Chicago Cubs prospect.
But yeah, they travel everywhere we went. They were Cubs fans, and yeah, Des Moines was, I have some family in Des Moines, so that kind of made it, nice. My cousins would invite me over for dinner, and um, you know, cook a nice home cooked meal when you're away from home is very nice. So, yeah, Des Moines was a good stay. Hopefully, uh, next year I'm not there the whole year, but
I'm
that's not
okay with
that's
that.
not
You can say
that's
it.
not my decision to make. But yeah, it was a good experience.
You talked about Cubs fans traveling, and the one moment when I kind of realized in my first year with the Iowa Cubs as well, when Shota made the rehab start in Nashville, and like he came off the mound the first time, and the whole first base side gave him a standing ovation. I don't know if you were on the field for that game or not, but it was like, wow, there are a ton of Cubs fans here.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I remember when they took him out, he got like a standing ovation. I was like, oh, that's pretty sick. So um, yeah, and it was awesome to play behind him because the pace of play was great.
And the food wasn't bad after the game either.
No, food was great.
All
Great
right, we're
spread
going
guy.
to move into our final segment here. We'll call it the pitch clock. So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. Just give me a short answer if you need an explanation, and we'll just run through a couple rapid fire questions. Halloween happened a few days ago now. What was your favorite candy as a kid, or what's your favorite candy right now?
Probably Kit Kat.
It's a good choice. How do you feel about like the special themed ones, like the white Oreo one on Halloween?
I'm
Have you
out on
been?
that. I just like the normal.
Fair enough. Are you a football guy? And if so, what's your team?
I'm kind of a football guy. I watch the Rams. My dad's a big Rams guy, so but I didn't grow up with them there, I guess in a sense. So I'm not like all in, but I still follow them.
Favorite road park in the International League to play at?
Um, Nashville was good. I liked playing in Columbus. Vegas, they're in the PCL, but that was probably my favorite trip of the year.
I don't think anybody would argue with that. We
Yeah,
walked into the hotel and you're like, okay, this is kind of what the big leagues might be like.
yeah, yeah.
What do you miss most during the season about California?
The weather, 100%.
What do you got on In and Out? Like I'm from the Midwest. I've had it one time. Does it live up to the hype as a native of California, or what is the story on In and Out?
I love it. Like if I'm going for fast food burger, it's always number one, but it's not the greatest uh option health wise, I'd say, but you know, it is mixed in there.
Yeah, the Cubs don't the strength and conditioning and the nutrition people don't want to hear about In and Out.
No, they don't. No.
What's maybe the best piece of advice you've received in your baseball career or in life in general?
Probably just, keep a level head. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Because that'll drive you nuts. Especially through a long season.
All right, two more. What is the toughest pitch to hit in your opinion?
Probably like a splitter or knuckleball. We faced St. Paul had a guy knuckleball, and that just like it does a different thing every time. So it's not like a predictable pitch shape, I'd say.
And if I remember right, he threw it a little bit harder too, and then he also had a pretty good fastball that he would mix in more than your average knuckleball pitcher.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to sit knuckleball, but then he'll pop a fastball, and you're like, well,
I think his
what am
name
I
was
supposed to
Corey
do?
Lewis. We saw
Corey,
him
yeah,
once.
that's right. One of those.
All right, last one for you. One pitcher from the Iowa Cubs this year that you would love to face for bragging rights.
Probably Jordan Wicks.
I feel like that might be a popular answer.
Yeah, I would love that. He would love that.
we can make it happen sometime, in the near future, hopefully, and get some cameras there. All
Yeah.
right, Johnny, appreciate your time again early in the off season here. But again, baseball is not all that far away, even though the World Series is still going on. But congrats again on everything you accomplished in 2025, and best of luck moving forward. Like you said, hopefully I don't spend too much time with you next year.
Thank you very much.